Bueno, dar los buenos días Anthony, buenos días Kristine, buenos días Olga, buenos días a quienes nos pueden acompañar, seguir en este panel. Mi nombre es Pablo Ruiz, soy parte del Observatorio para el Cierre de la Escuela de la América. Y bueno, acá en Chile también tenemos una revista que tiene un nombre bien bonito, el Derecho a Vivir en Paz, que es una canción de Víctor Jara, de nuestro grande Víctor Jara, asesinado por la dictadura militar. Brevemente quiero hacer una introducción. Bueno, primero contarles que en Chile, con las compañeras y los compañeros, estamos trabajando con propuestas para una nueva constitución. Seguimos gobernados por la constitución del dictador de Pinochet, sigue vigente. Y recordar que, bueno, los Estados Unidos apoyó esa dictadura y no nos vamos a olvidar. Segundo, decir que Colombia es uno de los países más militarizados de América Latina. 110.000 tropas han sido formadas en los últimos 20 años en los Estados Unidos, en la Escuela de las Américas como en otras academias militares. Cientos de mil hombres de Colombia han recibido entrenamiento por los Estados Unidos. Lo otro que quiero recordar, que el año 2008 conocí a Berta Cáceres en un foro contra la militarización que hubo en Honduras. Berta Cáceres fue asesinada por varios hombres. 7 de los acusados, 2 de ellos son entrenados en los Estados Unidos en la Escuela de la América. Quiero recordar también que en Bolivia el año 2019 hubo un golpe de Estado y también 6 de los que participaron en ese golpe de Estado eran graduados de la Escuela de la América, formados en los Estados Unidos. Para ir más cerquita, hace poco se conoció que los mercenarios colombianos que se entrenaron también en los Estados Unidos, los que asesinaron al presidente de Haití, 7 de ellos fueron formados en los Estados Unidos, 4 en la Escuela de la América en Windsor. Entonces, bueno, la capacitación, el entrenamiento militar que da Estados Unidos es una amenaza para todo nuestro continente. Decir, antes de finalizar, que luchamos contra las bases militares de Estados Unidos en América Latina. Sigue la base de Guantánamo en Cuba, que el gobierno cubano la reclama esos territorios, sigue esa base militar que también es una cárcel. Después viene la base Sotocano en Honduras, que tiene un batallón de 600 hombres. Bueno, vienen las bases de Estados Unidos en Colombia. Bueno, vienen las bases también del Reino Unido en las Malvinas. Apoyamos la causa de Argentina por la soberanía de las Islas Malvinas. Entonces, bueno, también hay presencia de la OTAN. Bueno, digo todo esto para hacer una introducción. Queremos esta mañana hablar un poco de otros problemas que implica la militarización. Entonces, primero quiero darle la palabra a Olga. Ella es investigadora social con estudios en enfermería y bueno, trabaja apoyando los esfuerzos de la revista El Derecho a Vivir en Paz que hacemos en Chile. Olga, tienes la palabra.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Estoy realmente muy contenta de teniendo esta oportunidad de compartir con ustedes en este foro. Hablo desde Brasil. Muchos de ustedes ya deben saber sobre el tremendo caos sanitario que hay acá, ¿no? Pero no sé si todos saben que se trata de un caos planeado por Bolsonaro y su militarizado gobierno, que desde el año pasado rechazó 11 ofertas formales de vacunas para obtener sobornos con esta compra, como apunta una reciente investigación parlamentaria. Este presidente ha dicho cosas como: la contaminación por COVID es más eficaz que la vacuna. Y que si te vacunas, el problema es tuyo si te vuelves un caimán. Además, se niega a adoptar medidas sanitarias para reducir la contaminación. Y aún convoca a la gente a la aglomeración, diciendo que todos moriremos un día. Entonces, eso no se trata de una imbecilidad gratuita, ¿no? Eso es una orientación política, una clara orientación política. Por eso, de verdad que en esas circunstancias no sería una exageración decir que Bolsonaro está utilizando el COVID como un arma biológica. Hay alrededor de 550.000 muertos acá, o sea, más de medio millón de personas que están muriendo por eso. Entonces, en Brasil solo. Entonces, acá realmente lo que está ocurriendo es una política de exterminio en curso. Sí, y es por eso que no podemos eximirnos de decir Bolsonaro genocida y exigir su condena nacional e internacionalmente. Bueno, sobre eso hay mucho que hablar, pero tenemos un tiempo limitado. Entonces, pensando ahora sobre qué otro asunto podría ser peor, más amenazante que Bolsonaro para Brasil y América Latina. Pues el incremento de los vínculos militares del gobierno de Brasil con los de Estados Unidos. Y eso incluye el entrenamiento y otros acuerdos militares que ponen en jaque nuestra soberanía. El 2017, luego un año después del golpe contra la presidenta Dilma Rousseff, Estados Unidos, Colombia y Perú realizaron ejercicios militares conjuntos en la Amazonía con el ejército brasileño. Esto de verdad que es algo inédito acá y contrario a todo lo determinado por la Estrategia Nacional de Defensa de nuestro país, ¿no? Eso eso expuso y sigue exponiendo nuestro territorio más prioritario por la defensa nacional a las Fuerzas Armadas de una potencia extranjera, ¿no? Entonces, es así que el 2019 Brasil y Estados Unidos firmaron un acuerdo para el uso del Centro de Lanzamiento Espacial de Alcântara, ¿no? Que está ubicado en el estado de Maranhão, acá en Brasil. Este acuerdo, además de aplastar nuestra soberanía, puede representar una amenaza mundial, porque aunque pocos conozcan en este mismo año, el 2019, Estados Unidos creó una fuerza espacial militar y es muy posible que en un futuro próximo quieran emplazar misiles en el espacio usando para eso la base de Alcântara, ¿no? Que es súper estratégica geopolíticamente hablando. Esto volvería la guerra de las galaxias, ¿no? Más que una película ficción, una amenaza de realidad terror. Sobre eso, también creo que es muy importante recordarnos que no solo recordar, exigir el cumplimiento del Tratado sobre el Espacio Ultraterrestre, ¿no? De 1967. Este tratado prohíbe el emplazamiento de armas nucleares o de cualquier tipo de armas de destrucción en masa en el espacio ultraterrestre. Entonces, saliendo ahora del espacio sideral y yendo ahora para nuestro ciberespacio más cercano, les quería recordar, bueno, semanas atrás hubo un bombardeo, seguramente en la prensa de ustedes también, sobre las denuncias de Estados Unidos que han sufrido ataques a su ciberseguridad. Esto de verdad que también es una táctica de ciberataque a nuestra memoria, ¿no? Al hardware de nuestra conciencia, porque eso saca del foco a quién realmente es en el transcurrir de la historia el principal autor de este tipo de violación, ¿no? Son los propios Estados Unidos, ¿no? Este está muy claro. Les recuerdo que el año 2013, la presidenta Dilma Rousseff denunció ante la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas las prácticas de espionaje internacional que vienen a la luz en estos años por las denuncias de Edward Snowden, ¿no? Y que en 2015 esto se reveló aún más la extensión de estas intervenciones. En 2015 se quedó aún más claro la amplitud, ¿no? de este tipo de invasión acá en Brasil. La defensa de Estados Unidos ha justificado este recurso en nombre de su seguridad nacional, vean, en nombre de su seguridad nacional. Aunque de verdad sigue faltando una explicación plausible a nuestra sanidad mental sobre qué tenía que ver con amenaza terrorista a los Estados Unidos la presidenta Dilma y sus ministros, sus asesores y diplomáticos, para que tuvieran sus teléfonos intervenidos e incluso los teléfonos de sus hogares. ¿Y qué decir del Banco Central de Brasil, que también estaba intervenido por la Agencia Nacional de Seguridad de Estados Unidos? El Banco Central de Brasil, una amenaza terrorista a la seguridad nacional de Estados Unidos, deja que pensar, ¿no? Entonces, imaginen ustedes la situación al revés. Si fuera Brasil que hubiera espiado a Estados Unidos, pero mucho menos Estados Unidos ya hubiera declarado la guerra, ¿no? Pero no solo espiaron a Brasil, sino también autoridades de México, Francia, Alemania, entre otras, ¿no? Y bueno, aún hay quien tiene algunas ilusiones, ¿no? Entonces, para los que quieren ilusionarse creyendo que esta es una página pasada, les recuerdo que el diario Newsweek, ¿no?, señaló en mayo de este año que el Pentágono tiene un ejército de 60.000 espías. También hace pocos días atrás se publicó un informe que señala que el gobierno de Estados Unidos está capacitando a jóvenes de 12 a 18 años de habla portuguesa para que den el primer paso en su camino para convertirse en ciberguerreros. Y con suerte, algún día trabajar como espías para la Agencia de Seguridad Nacional de Estados Unidos. Entonces, esto es muy grave y son hechos muy recientes. También quiero recordar, es importante tenernos en mente, el sabotaje cibernético contra el sistema eléctrico en Venezuela, sucedido en 2019, y que afectó al 80% de la población venezolana. 80%. Un ataque planificado cuyo objetivo era profundizar el malestar social y económico, así que resultó. Quiero también mencionar el caso de Cuba, y cómo se ha manipulado las redes sociales para generar el caos allá, sembrar el odio y acusar al gobierno cubano de violar a los derechos humanos. Entonces, nada dicen de la guerra que hay de Estados Unidos contra Cuba o contra Venezuela. Eso no es noticia, ¿no? Para nosotros. El bloqueo económico es un arma de guerra. Y el verdadero responsable de las dificultades económicas, el gran responsable por las dificultades económicas de estos dos países. Pueden haber otras más, pero lógico, hay otras más, pero esta es la principal. Quiero también dejar registrado nuestro reconocimiento a Cuba, que ha tenido una enorme solidaridad con muchos países del mundo, al enviar no solo brigadas médicas, pero también brigadas de educadores, ¿no? En la lucha contra el analfabetismo. Y bien, hay otro asunto muy serio, muy importante para hablarnos también, que es la cuestión del armamento nuclear, ¿no? Esto es muy, muy grave, nos inquieta bastante, ¿no? Partiendo de la base que solo hay un país en el mundo que ha sido capaz de utilizarlo contra otra nación. Y bueno, adivinen quién es esto. Es una tarea difícil recordar, Estados Unidos, ¿no? Pero seguro que Kristine y Anthony aportarán mejor sobre este tema. Muchas gracias por la atención.
Muchas gracias, Olga, por tu intervención. Vamos a dar la palabra a Kristine Karch. Ella es copresidenta de la Red Internacional No a la Guerra, No a la OTAN. Kristine, bienvenida y adelante, te queremos escuchar. Gracias.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to this important webinar. And hello and good afternoon, or more or less, yeah, good evening, because in Germany we are reaching the end of the day soon. And I will talk about, yes, of course, 4 points today about nuclear weapons, NATO, and as a global military monster, EU militarization, and 2% of GDP as target for military spending. As you may know, the US is the country with the most military bases outside their own country, around about 800, spread all over the globe, and the highest defense budget with almost 800 US dollars in 2020, which is 3.7% of GDP. But I think Anthony will talk more about this topic, and I will concentrate to other militarization causes like the EU and NATO, which are also threats to peace in case of their militarization. And I will focus on this point. And also EU members like France and no, only EU member France has nuclear weapons, and Great Britain has nuclear weapons but left the European Union. So we have 2 nuclear weapon states in Europe and 2 NATO members with nuclear states. And we have a lot of US nuclear weapons in Europe, round about 100. And nowadays, mankind is on the brink of a double suicide, as fast one by the nuclear weapons, whose modernization and armament is pushed by all nuclear weapon states, or a slow one by global warming and destruction of nature and environment. On July 8, 1996, the International Court of Justice in The Hague found that the deterrence of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons generally violates international law. Moreover, there is an obligation to conduct and conclude negotiations in good faith leading to nuclear disarmament in all its aspects under strict and effective international control. 4 years ago, 122 states conducted and concluded these negotiations. On July 7th, 2017, the TPNW, Treaty of Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, was adopted, which entered into force on January 22nd this year, after at least 50 states ratified it. And this treaty was not only negotiated by 122 states, it was also negotiated with the civil society, mainly with ICANN and all member organizations of ICANN. And there were partners in these negotiations at the UN. Meanwhile, 86 states have signed the treaty and 45 states have ratified it. This means that nuclear weapons are outlawed under international law. Unfortunately, the Federal Republic of Germany is not a signatory, neither any other NATO country. Most recent meeting in June, NATO even reaffirmed the role of nuclear deterrence and clearly positioned itself against the UN treaty banning nuclear weapons. On the other side, however, German federal government declares a world free of nuclear weapons to a big goal for its foreign policy, but it do nothing to get rid of the nuclear weapons in Germany. And the other US nuclear weapons are located in Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, and all these 4 countries are so-called nuclear sharing with these US nuclear weapons, and this violates the non-proliferation treaty because this prohibits the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and this is not in, according to this law, and all these European countries have signed this treaty. The situation in Turkey is a little bit different. There the nuclear weapons are still under the US control. And in Germany, the government is planning to modernize the airbase where the nuclear weapons are located. It's a German airbase Büchel with 260 million euros, and to buy 45 new F-16 bombers for 7.5 billion euros to meet the requirements of the US nuclear weapons. And also France and Britain are modernizing their nuclear weapons. And we have a coalition, Nuke Free Europe, which organizes in September a month of actions against the US nuclear weapons in Europe. And we will have a bicycle tour connecting the nuclear weapon bases in Germany, Uschel and Ramstein, the biggest US airbase outside of the USA, which is also responsible for the drone flights. And the other airbase, Volkel in Netherlands and Kleine Brogel in Belgium. The nuclear weapons have to be kicked out, and we demand from our countries to sign the TBNW treaty and also to take part on the first state conference in Vienna in mid of January next year. Now I will come to the NATO. So NATO is the biggest and most aggressive military alliance in the world. And instead of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it should better be called Nuclear Terror Organization. At the latest, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, NATO, a supposed defense alliance, has become an aggressive intervention alliance that acts as a world policeman and tries to replace the United Nations. The result of all the interventions, often discussed as humanitarian aid, were always the same: lead to the destruction of societies and nature, leaving behind poverty, hunger, violence, and failed states. And at its NATO summit this year in Brussels, NATO adopted a new strategy which appears to be old wine in new bottles, as we say in Germany. The document reiterates the propagandistic claim that the alliance is based on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law to promote stability and well-being in the North Atlantic area. In reality, NATO's history is soaked in blood. The military alliance and several of its member states have helped initiate coups d'etat and supported dictatorships. They fought wars worldwide, destabilizing countries such as Algeria, Vietnam, the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, resulting in millions of innocent victims and so-called failed states. The new agenda will continue endless war. NATO 2030 employs a world vision in terms of threats with the primary aim of legitimization, rearmament, and global military expansion, even though NATO and its member states are often responsible for many of these threats. The report uses hostile language stigmatizing China and Russia as systemic rivals, with recommendations that will lead to growing confrontation. While there is no immediate threat from either country, NATO is ramping up propaganda to justify rising military spending, even though the COVID-19 pandemic is having a huge impact on government budgets. NATO is littered with imagined enemy images, demonizing above all Russia and China. Non-military solutions without dominations and aggressions are unthinkable for NATO. This even includes challenges like climate change, loss of biodiversity, and environmental protection. And for all these, they are executing military exercises, huge exercises under the lead of US and NATO countries, with and NATO member countries and non-member countries. Recently, Defender Europe with Georgia and Ukraine together in the Balkans and in the Black Sea on the border of Russia. Talisman Sabre, a traditional US and Australian exercise, this year also includes forces from Japan, UK, Canada, South Korea, and New Zealand. And as observers will take part India, Indonesia, Germany, and France. And we have RIMPAC every 2 years, the world's largest international maritime warfare exercise, with last year 10 countries taking part. And also NATO still exists and need nuclear weapons and deterrence and maintaining nuclear arms, advocating for revitalization of nuclear sharing arrangements and critical element of NATO's deterrence policy. And NATO reserves the right to first strike with nuclear weapons. And NATO is a global alliance, not only about the North Atlantic, also it has connections like to Colombia, who is a member of global NATO. It had friendship agreements with Australia and New Zealand. It has a Mediterranean dialogue with all the countries around the Mediterranean Sea. It has connections with how do you say in English? The Arabic countries on around Syria and Assad and so on. And with all these countries, there are relations that they can need their military installation together. So NATO is not only in Colombia present, it's also present in the Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao Islands, because this is belongs to the Netherlands, and also French and other islands around in Latin America, where NATO is, and UK is also on the Malvinas. And before I come to the end, I see Pablo make his camera on. I have to talk shortly about the European Union, because she's also a driver for militarization, because it's mentioned in the Lisbon Treaty that all members of the European Union have to increase the military budget annually to modernize and all their infrastructure and create better defense capacity. And they have the project PESCO, their country which like to work stronger together on military issues are working together, and they're planning with the lead of France, Germany and Spain, a new system called FCAS. It's, how do you say, it's a very 300 billion euros expensive projects, and the central project of FCAS is a new generation finder. Combat aircraft is also be used as a nuclear weapon carrier, at least, and it is surrounded by weaponized drones such as the Eurodrone, and swarms of drones is turned and connected in a combat cloud with other NGFs, with satellites, intelligence, drone and aircraft, tankers, warships, and armored unit in real time. Artificial intelligence plays an all-pervasive central role in the combat cloud. And this is a further automatization of war. Humans are not necessary anymore. The robots will do the work, including decision taking. And to finance this, the the NATO and also European Union asks their members to increase the military budget to 2% of GDP. But this is not what we want. We need the money for other things, to take care for each other, for health, security systems, for education, and social, environmental issues. And we have to overcome the militaristic logic, which is based on hierarchical power structures, and we have to replace it with a peace logic, a culture of peace. We need solidarity instead of competition and rivalry. And we have to come back to a common security, like the Olaf Palme report proposed it nearly 40 years ago. We need a policy of détente, remembering what we achieved in the 80s with this, but we have to adapt it to today's developments, for example, the climate disaster, respect and dignity also towards others must find its way back into international politics. With this, we can come to our vision of a peaceful, social, ecological, gender just world. Thank you for your attendance.
Muchas gracias, Kristine. Ella, como digo, es copresidenta de la Red Internacional No a la Guerra, No a la OTAN, que agrupa a muchas organizaciones de paz del mundo. Quiero dar la palabra a continuación, sin antes, bueno, agradecer a los contactos, a Mary de Paz Christi, que nos haya puesto en conexión con Anthony Donovan, un activista por la paz, también enfermero y bueno, que lleva harto tiempo en la lucha de fines de los 60 a favor de la paz. El tema de las armas nucleares y de las guerras, recordando desde Vietnam hasta ahora, causan muchos muertos y como decía un historiador, Erich Hoffman, casi el 80% de los que mueren son civiles, personas comunes y corrientes. Anthony, tienes la palabra.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you, SOAWatch. Your work is critical. Kristine, thank you. Everything you said is vital, is important, and I'm in total agreement. We need to get rid of NATO. We need an alliance to help save civilization and the world, face climate, face social justice. So you said it well. I won't repeat. And Olga, thank you very much. And I love the fact that you talked about weapons in space. There's a book I really highly recommend. I don't know if you could see it. It's JFK and the Unspeakable. Maybe it's upside down for you. JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas, which goes into the surrounding John F. Kennedy, our president, in just 2 months before he was assassinated, went to the UN and said, we must not weaponize space. And he called for actually US and Russia at that time, the height of the Cold War, to come together to go peacefully to space. He wanted to go to the moon together with Russia, it was Soviet Union at that time, our ultimate enemy. So we have long examples of people who gave their lives to try to work towards peace. And I want to thank Adrian, our translator, by the way, and I want to thank Mary Jelinek of Pax Christi International, who referred me as well for this session. What we're doing here is we're making these connections, personal connections, and to me, this is the only way we can affect militarization of the world, by making these human connections one-to-one with each other. It's always been the answer to stop the fear, to stop the stereotypes, to stop the hate, is by making these personal connections. So I want to thank everyone who is watching today and listening. Listening is the key. I've learned everything I know by listening to so many inspiring people around the world. I thank you. Thank you for giving us this time in this space. So yeah, John F. Kennedy, not many people knew it, but John F. Kennedy was working behind the scenes with Khrushchev, the Soviet leader. And we know this with Pope John the 23rd. We know this from a book called The Improbable Triumvirate. This is by Norman Cousins, 1972. So behind the scenes, Kennedy was reaching out to Khrushchev, President Khrushchev, saying, my right wing is pressing me so hard. They want to go into Vietnam. They want us in Vietnam. They want our nuclear weapons. This is crazy. They almost, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, almost blew up the world. So the two leaders, Khrushchev and Kennedy, knew this. Khrushchev also had his right wing that didn't believe that the right wing always thinks that military is going to be our safety and our security. So Kristine mentioned the TPNW, the treaty that just passed, the prohibition on nuclear weapons in the UN. I was really fortunate to be there, part of that treaty throughout. And I did 2 side panels because I knew I hope that conference would become a treaty. And if it did, I knew the first thing that would happen is our NATO countries in alliance would start talking about, this is naive, this is dangerous, these people don't know what they're talking about, they're interfering with all our hard work. The true security is, we have a mechanism set up for our security. We knew that they would come out with these lies. So we had this panel to prepare ourselves for this attack. And we are all facing very strong propaganda from our military industries, not just the United States, by the way, in all our countries.
Yes.
The armament industry is extremely strong everywhere. And you are to find out what the armament corporations are in your country and do your best to turn that around. I have a good friend, Timon Wallace, who is a Quaker. He wrote a great report. It's called Warheads to Windmills,
Yes.
which basically these are the jobs that we employ now with our nuclear weapons system, several thousand important high-paying jobs. But these are the jobs we can create when we transform these to what the world really needs to deal with climate and our many social justice problems. So there are many, and that came out in 2019, three years ago. It was presented in our Congress. But the strong words of war, we are all together in standing up. And it is the one-to-one small individual actions that make a big difference here, people. So whatever you do is important. Reykjavik, we had this wonderful, where's that? We had this wonderful person, Gorbachev, come in the scene. And Kristine mentioned, but in Reykjavik, I had the honor to go to Reykjavik and look at this little house where he came and met President Reagan. And it's this one-to-one, once again, these are arch enemies building our nuclear weapons to annihilate the whole world together. We don't care about others, right? And Gorbachev said, hey, let's just get together and we can talk about this. And there was personal chemistry. They looked out this beautiful window overlooking an ocean, the two of them alone, looking at the ocean, talking about their families, talking about food, talking about life. And all of a sudden, two of these arch enemies started talking about, well, let's try to get rid of these things. And we came this close to getting rid of our nuclear weapons at that time, 1986, Reykjavik. Yeah. But Gorbachev wrote in his memoirs, I have somewhere, but in his memoirs, he said, but then an invisible hand came in, So a lot of people were doing a lot of work. We've negotiated these problems for many, many years, but an invisible hand, and we know now what that invisible hand, it's our industries, it's our capitalists that make money off of this industry, supported by, yes, NATO. And Kristine knows much more than I do, but most are allies that are democracies. They're people, when you do a poll and do a little education, 70%, 83% of the citizens want nothing to do with nuclear weapons. They want us to sign this treaty. I know in Germany, and Kristine knows, I think it's 83% of the people want our 20 nuclear weapons out of Buchel Air Base. And I do too. I was very fortunate, Kristine, to be over there in Buchel and to join hands and get arrested in Buchel. And I must admit, the Germans treat prisoners, or arrestees much, much better than we do here in the United States. But I was asked by Pedro to speak about something very important. Just local, everything's local, and it's what we do as individuals is critical. Dorothy Day, who in 1931, along with another, formed the Catholic Worker Movement, serving the poor, the homeless, the sick. She opened up these houses of hospitality, but she was steadfast against the machinery of war. She knew we spent most our money on war. We still do, by far, all of us, and we know this. But in the Catholic Worker House, and she was the first to put in writing in the stand-up right after Hiroshima. She put in writing in the Catholic Worker, the paper that still exists today, that we have just killed our innocent brothers and sisters in, the civilians she's talking about, thousands of them. We've vaporized them. So breathe their dust in the air coming over New York. This is one humanity. So she was a lone voice then, standing up. As we cheered the end of World War II, she was saying, wait a second, we've just annihilated these innocent people. Can we think about this? So she's from the start been against nuclear weapons and got arrested in the 1950s many times, year after year, going down to our city hall. Her granddaughter, along with 6 others, and got arrested by entering a nuclear submarine base in Georgia, our state of Georgia. This one nuclear submarine base, called the Kings Bay base, houses enough nuclear weapons in this one base to destroy our entire planet, or the humanity. The insects will live, but the humanity many times over, this one base. And people in the area don't even know it exists. It's don't ask, don't tell policy. So there are people actually that live within miles of this base, have no idea that there are nuclear weapons there. So they went into this base, 7 Catholic workers, nonviolent civil disobedience. They entered with a Martin Luther King banner saying, love one another. They went in prayer. Love one another, I guess, is a very radical notion, right? Everyone on this webinar must. So this is a danger to our state. So to the American military industrial complex. So these people had hearings and a trial in which they were not allowed to disclose the horrors of these weapons, talk about them. The jury never heard the particulars of why, their motivation, their manifesto that they brought in. They also brought in a great book, another book, sorry people, but Daniel Ellsberg, The Doomsday Machine. They brought that in. This is 2018. They went in on the day of Martin Luther King's assassination, the anniversary of his assassination. He was one of our great spokespeople. We've lost many of our leaders who have spoken against the military-industrial complex. Martin Luther King was one. John F. Kennedy was another. He was trying to stop this machine, and they stopped him. So you need to be brave, and I thank every one of you for being brave, for being courageous, for being wise, for being in solidarity with each other throughout this. So anyway, they spent time in prison. Martha Hennessy will be getting out tomorrow from prison, 3 years on and off. Their trial was pretty much a sham. And I don't know much what else I could go on. I'm not sure of my time here, but let me just say there's a few. How are we doing on time? Should I wrap it up? Well, 2 more minutes.
Continúa un par de minutos.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. But things happen in just individual ways. There's a bank in New York City. It's called Amalgamated Bank. It's 100 years in my local area here. And in talking with them about this documentary, which I did, and Pedro can link our links to the work that all of us do. But in this documentary, I was speaking to the bank, the vice president, about this 8 years ago. And they kept track of this. It's you form a one-to-one relationship with people, right? And this is how you build trust. It's the same with our enemies. One-to-one relationships build trust. And that's how you get rid of the need for militarism. But when the treaty was coming up, they put out an announcement that their bank would have no transactions and no investments in any armament corporation, none, from handguns to nuclear weapons. So they put this public statement out, and they're made policies to that effect. So that's one bank, and we're spreading the word. But this is what individuals can do, and thank you. We had an event in New York City. There's a St. Patrick's parade where everyone gets together and celebrates their Irishness, right? But they didn't allow gay people and LGBTQ people in this parade for many years. So the LGBTQ got their own parade together separately and did their own parade. So in this, after the treaty happened and became adopted, one of the leaders of that, the founders of that alternate parade, decided to have activists that were involved in the treaty here in New York to have them speak at the parade. They did. That inspired a couple of our council members, people in our city council, New York City Council. Remember, New York City, this little town where I live, is the home of Wall Street. And it's the town of Wall Street where all the money for these industries flow. But in giving that presentation, one council member, Daniel Drum, stood up and wrote a proposal for a resolution. That resolution went to City Hall. It got a majority of council members to sign on, and we're well on our way to that becoming reality. But this is how it happens, by one people making an action. So we're supporting the treaty. We're calling for divestment here in the town of Wall Street from our pension funds. So I just want to support whatever you do individually. Have faith that whomever you're speaking can spread the word in different ways, be it your local city council or be it your bank, or the bank didn't stand up against nuclear weapons because we had placards protesting outside the bank. It happened because trust was built with one or two people. And I think that's our strong card in all this. I want to thank everyone for keeping on. And one last thing, recently, the past couple of months, I've been speaking with some diplomats in Nepal. Nepal is a tiny country, as you know. It is surrounded by nuclear weapon states: China, India, Pakistan. That's it. That's its borders. All three powerful nuclear weapon states that they rely on for trade. And the US, we've been going to Nepal to climb Mount Everest since the 60s or before. And Russia. All these countries vying for power within Nepal. Well, Nepal happens to be the country where Buddha is born. And a few diplomats are saying, hey, let's remember the message of Buddha, compassionate for all beings. And they are pushing in their parliament. They signed the treaty, but they're pushing to ratify it. So God bless. Thank you for listening. Keep hope. And I look forward to your questions and hearing more from my colleagues. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Anthony. Mostraste muchos libros y amamos los libros. Bueno, primero recordar, darte las gracias y pedir por la libertad de esos activistas católicos prisioneros en los Estados Unidos. Hay varios, hay muchos presos políticos en las cárceles de Estados Unidos, y el movimiento contra la Escuela de la América ha tenido muchos prisioneros de conciencia en esta historia larga, denunciando el entrenamiento, el imperialismo de los Estados Unidos y el daño. Algunos comentarios. Bueno, José Frías, un compañero nuestro chileno del comité, Oscar Romero, pregunta qué hacer. Bueno, acá recordarle a José que con José y otros compañeros chilenos y también de Estados Unidos estuvimos fuera de la base del Fuerte Aguayo varias veces, denunciando y pidiendo que se fuera a Estados Unidos de esa base militar que está cerca de Santiago. El Comando Sur instaló una base militar acá en Chile años atrás, hicimos varias protestas. Segundo, gracias Ricardo Cardona. Ricardo plantea que tenemos que poner atención sobre la arma. Efectivamente, Estados Unidos vende muchas armas a todos los países del mundo, y a Chile, a Colombia, a Bolivia, mucho del armamento es de Estados Unidos, y algunos de ellos son bombas lacrimógenas, escopetas y balas que lamentablemente terminan en el propio pueblo cuando hay golpes de Estado y represión. También, bueno, mencionar el trabajo de alianza que hacemos con los Centros Amigos por la Paz de Costa Rica. Ellos allá trabajan contra el militarismo. Están ahora participando varias compañeras y compañeros de la Comisión Construcción de Paz de la Alianza con Vía 20. Gracias por estar presentes y compartir este foro. Freddy Sandoval, por ejemplo, de El Salvador, donde Estados Unidos tiene una base de entrenamiento para policías que se llama ILEA. En El Salvador, Freddy Sandoval, desde El Salvador, nos dice que este foro es muy necesario, es oportuno, y bueno, felicita la iniciativa. Alfonso también nos escribe que, bueno, Colombia participa en varios países interviniendo, capacitando, y también, bueno, ya hablé del papel que han tenido en Haití. Solángela, también de Colombia, habla del papel de la policía y que se está intentando hacer un uniforme global. Agregar a todo eso que, bueno, revisé delante, poca gente lo sabe, pero al día de ayer habían 564 personas que habían muerto por abuso policial en los Estados Unidos solo este año. Son cosas que no aparecen en la prensa, porque siempre en la prensa se conoce la información hegemónica, malintencionada. Bueno, antes de dar la palabra a nuestros panelistas para que puedan agregar nuevos comentarios, una vuelta de unos 2-3 minutos cada uno. Recordar, Anthony, que bueno, Gorbachev firmó con Reagan el tratado de misiles de rango intermedio. Ese tratado, lamentablemente, Estados Unidos se salió. Y se salió también del tratado a cielo abierto. Son dos tratados muy importantes para el control de las armas nucleares. Actualmente solo hay un tratado vigente, que es el tratado START 3, que ratificó el presidente Biden. Y bueno, nosotros en la Comisión Construcción de Paz hemos estado conversando este tema. El Papa Francisco ha manifestado su preocupación por el armamento nuclear. Entonces, bueno, vamos a dar una vuelta con sus impresiones, y si quieren agregar más, vamos a partir con Olga, Kristine y, bueno, Anthony, en torno a estos comentarios. Olga, adelante. No te escuchamos, Olga.
¿Ahora sí?
Sí, ahora sí.
Sí.
Adelante.
Bueno, más una vez agradecer la participación y el interés de todos y todas que están con nosotros en esta actividad. Y muy interesante, excelente las contribuciones, colaboraciones de los participantes aquí también, Kristine y Anthony, las indicaciones de los libros, realmente excelente. Que Anthony compartió con nosotros, y Kristine también, además de todos estos datos alarmantes sobre el tema de la OTAN y la amenaza que representa a la paz mundial. También hizo referencia, mencionó un tema que también no podemos dejar pasar, que es muy importante y que nos está amenazando cotidianamente, que es la emergencia climática, ¿no? En algún momento Kristine habló de este tema de los cambios climáticos también. Entonces, esta gran amenaza que constituye también la destrucción acelerada de la selva amazónica que estamos viendo ahora con niveles récords, ahora con el gobierno de Bolsonaro. Entonces, la destrucción de la mayor selva tropical que tenemos en el planeta volvería incontornable, no habría como controlar de manera ninguna el sobrecalentamiento global que estamos pasando, ¿no? Entonces, comparto con ustedes un dato reciente también, que en los últimos 11 meses del año pasado para acá, de los últimos 11 meses, hubo un aumento de la devastación forestal de 51%. Eso equivale a una devastación mayor, una proporción de una década de devastación. Para que tengan una idea cómo está acelerado este proceso. Lo que pasó en 11 meses de devastación equivaldría a 10 años de devastación en nuestro territorio, en la región de la Amazonía. Eso es como, solo el mes pasado, el junio, fue devastado una área, un territorio correspondiente a más que 3 veces el tamaño de la ciudad en que vivo, ¿no? Y yo vivo en una ciudad grande, Fortaleza, para que tengan idea de la proporción absurda. Solo en junio fue un territorio devastado como 3 veces más el tamaño de mi ciudad. Entonces, esto es un grave riesgo. El estado de Pará, que es donde ocurre la mayor devastación de la selva, es el lugar más letal del mundo para los defensores de la tierra y del medio ambiente. Es importante dejar eso también registrado. Algo también muy impactante y que casi no vemos más salir en ninguna noticia, y creo que poca gente sabe, se utilizaron más de 100 toneladas. 100 toneladas es un dato oficial, miren. 100 toneladas de mercurio en la amazónica para extracción ilegal de oro, ¿no? Entonces, solo del año de 2019 a 2020, 100 toneladas de mercurio. Entonces, eso está la contaminación se alastrando allá, ¿no? La gente, los suelos, el aire y el río, ¿no? Los ríos, ¿no? Entonces, y hablando también de río, ahora me viene otra preocupación, el río Amazonas, que cerca, bueno, ya en Perú, ¿eh? En la parte amazónica de Perú, cerca del río Amazonas, hay una de las instalaciones de la NARUM 6, ¿eh? Que es esto, una unidad de investigación médica naval de Estados Unidos, o sea, una base militar, ¿eh? una de estas instalaciones está allá, ¿no? En Iquitos, cerca allá del río Amazonas, entre otras instalaciones que hay en Perú, y que recientemente también en Sotocano, en Honduras, fue abierta una sucursal de esta misma base militar, ¿no? Que tiene el rótulo de ser una base que hace investigaciones de enfermedades infecciosas. Entonces, esto es de verdad muy alarmante porque tenemos conciencia que está, primeramente, es una base militar, eso ya nos deja realmente indignados, ¿no? Y además de ser militar, está manipulando, está diciendo que está haciendo investigaciones, pero no deja transparente este proceso de cómo está siendo manejado estas dichas investigaciones a servicio de qué realmente. Entonces nos deja con mucha preocupación porque está en las manos del el país que ya produjo innumerables armas biológicas alrededor del mundo para atingir innumerables países, ¿no? Y muchos de nuestros países en Latinoamérica han sido víctimas de eso. Entonces, compartir con ustedes esta preocupación y que nos quedemos alertas a este riesgo.
Muchas gracias, Olga. Kristine. No te escuchamos.
Sorry, I forgot to switch on my mic. I want to make some comments regarding this environmental question. We tried in Germany to really bring together the movements like Fridays for Future and other environmental movements with the peace movement, because all military installations and military activities are destroying the environment, even if they are only present because they, this ground is not useful for anything else. And also they are a huge polluter, not only in the air, but also in the ground. And I remember all the strategy about PFAS in the fire foam of the United States air bases around the world and in the United States itself, but also used by other military forces and firefighter and disturbing the environment. And on the other side, the military and the army are used if you have environmental problems like very heavy rain and flood from small rivers growing up to a huge river, like it happened the last weekend in Germany. It was pictures like we know from other countries from the global south, and it happens in Germany. And with this rain, died over 100 people, and still 40 are missed. And everyone called for the military, and the army should come and help and support us. And they was used to call for the army and not to see how we can increase our other support organizations for civilian support and to help in such a situation. It's not underlying this all militaristic structures like the army. And the same happens with Corona. They put for vaccinations the army to the vaccination centers, also for testing they use the army, and sometimes even in the hospital they ask for the army, and the army said, oh yes, we are our friend and we help you. And the peoples are used to the person in a uniform, and that the military is everywhere in the streets and taking care for the order. And this, I think, is a very dangerous situation, and we have to stress it and really see that the voices will be heard, like Anthony mentioned, of this 83% in Germany who are against nuclear weapons, and also a similar percentage are against use of the German army outside of the country, and against intervention wars. But on the other side, we have to see that this huge majority, which is against these interventional wars, are decreasing, because with all these advertising for the military and telling them, oh, you can have very interesting technical jobs and it's a good way to earn money, and the lot are accepted this thinking, and some are going to the military because they didn't find other jobs. But on the other side, if they are in the military, they change their mind and accept more and more also intervention and this aggressive military policy, and not, maybe, I think it's not working, but the original original intent of defense, because I think you cannot defend, or you cannot overcome problems defending yourself with violence, because violence will produce more violence. And there we have to be careful and to see how we can, we have to see how we can overcome this thinking that we can find answers in violence and not in peaceful conflict solutions. And so we have to go on. And I think it's necessary to come back again to the streets and make actions, and not only virtual like this one, how important I know that they are. And we had also, I think it's 2 weeks ago, a webinar from the campaign Stop Airbase Ramstein International Conference Against Military Bases, which was a hybrid event, and Pablo participated also there, and the others, some attended in person in Kaiserslautern in Germany. This also we need, but we need really the actions on the streets, and we make a bicycle ride around the airbase to address our wishes to get rid of these bases and the drone flight. And this we should go on in international connections, and then we can support together and can learn from each other and the different problems.
Gracias, Kristine. Anthony.
Well, Kristine, you say it all. Thank you so much. Really, really so beautifully. So thank you very much. Another book I'm going to show you is the book on Dorothy Day, by one of her granddaughters, Kate Hennessy, and it's called The World Will Be Saved by Beauty. So, and we have to remember to be compassionate with ourselves. These are the problems we are talking today can seem overwhelming, very oppressive, exhausting, and depressive. So I encourage us all to save ourselves through beauty, stay close to nature, stay close to family and loved ones, and nurture. And also, besides our protesting, which I think is important, remember the one-to-one connections. I think that's really, I learned this the hard way because I was a believing American. I got news for you. I didn't come out against wars. I came out believing what I was told. I was an American who believed in America. America would not do anything wrong, wouldn't hurt anybody. We were out saving the world. I don't know if you know that out there, but we were going to save the whole world. So Vietnam, we were saving the Vietnamese from those horrible communists that were killing women and children. That's what I grew up with and in. And it wasn't until 1968, really, where we started having these riots on our streets that we started waking up, and we lost the number of our leaders that were speaking the language of peace. They got rid of them. And that's when I just started questioning. But it wasn't until, by mistake, really, I went to a rally on Wall Street. There was a rally happening. I went there out of curiosity. There were some Black Panthers, and there were some veterans back from Vietnam. And I said, let me hear, not through the media, but let me speak to some of these people back from Vietnam. So what I didn't know is our president, Nixon at the time, this is 1970, had told all the right-wing groups in the tri-state area that this little protest was happening on Wall Street, a couple of hundred of us, protesting the war. And these people, my elders, these people were all in their 40s. They were very old people then, 30s, 40s, 50s. But they were there telling us that Wall Street was connected to the war. And I didn't quite understand that yet. So I went innocently. I went still believing in my country, was doing the right thing. And I actually wanted to go. There was a time I wanted to go to Vietnam. I wanted to get in uniform and I wanted to go. I remember the Anthony that wanted to go to war. So that's still in me. I can recall this. But it's there where thousands of construction workers, all waving the American flag, surrounded us, thousands of them, with their tools, with their 2x4s. And they sent about 80 of us to the hospital. A lot of people got severely injured. I got very beat up. And that was the baptism. That's what kind of woke me up. And Wall Street, from the windows above us, the traders, they were throwing graffiti, cheering these construction workers on. So we all need to be awakened. And I don't know how we awaken those of us who don't know about this. They're innocent. I have friends that work for the industry. I have friends, relatives that work on Wall Street. So it's in conversation with them that we slowly get our points off. There was Archbishop Romero was mentioned by one of the questioners. And I just want to say that Archbishop Romero was on my screensaver. He was the face on my computer for several years while I made my documentary against nuclear weapons. I had his face on he was a very important inspiration to me. And I also, about prisons, you mentioned other people going to prison. Yes, I did workshops for 10 years in prisons on community building, but the Kings Bay Plowshares, the 7 that went into prison, they'll be the first ones to say, don't feel sorry for us. We're here to witness. They could have been shot and killed, by the way. They went in knowing they could be killed by entering a nuclear weapon base. But they also knew they would be in prison. So they're not saying, oh, poor us, we're in prison. Never once. They're saying, look at our brothers and sisters who are in this oppressive prison system. And you're absolutely right for pointing that out. Too many, we need to reform our prison system major. So anyway, there are many things to go over. I do want to say that Brazil and Chile had fantastic ambassadors back in 2017 that were on the floor speaking for this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I remember them clearly. I can't remember their name, but every time the ambassador of Chile or Brazil and other countries, but those two in particular, stood up and spoke up for this treaty. Remember, it was just a dream. Having this treaty was just a dream before it happened. It was a great day. It was a great day. But I want to thank your two countries for having representatives that really helped push this through. And Germany and the US, no, we did not help. Anyway, enough. I'll let other people speak. Thank you.
Maybe a short remark from my side. Is it allowed, Pablo? May I have a short comment?
Sí, sí.
Don't forget that Latin America is a nuclear weapon-free zone since years, and you have to take care that it still keeps a nuclear weapon-free zone, because I'm not sure that about the policy of Bolsonaro in Brazil, what there will happen in the future and what is ongoing with the connection between Brazil and United States. And I think we should keep this. And the Treaty of Togo, I cannot express this city, but we should have this in mind.
Gracias, Kristine. Anthony me dejó celoso con tantos libros y les quería mostrar una portada antigua de la revista El Derecho a Vivir en Paz que hacemos en Chile con Olga, con Carlos González, con Félix y tantas compañeras y compañeros que ponen su granito de arena para hacer esta revista de difusión sobre temas de América Latina y temas por la paz. Me encantó mucho, Anthony, que mostraras libros. Podríamos hacer un foro de literatura. Hay un grito, presupuestos militares para escuelas y hospitales. Lamentablemente América Latina gasta mucho dinero y el mundo y Estados Unidos, que es lejos, como decía Kristine, casi 800.000 millones de dólares, mucho dinero en guerra y bueno, eso no queremos. Quiero, bueno, agradecer a Mario Venegas de SOAWatch Chicago, a Rebeca Zúñiga, coordinadora del Consejo de SOAWatch, y bueno, a Carlos González, María Elena de Iglesias por la Paz de México, a Mario y Marcela Zamora del Centro Amigos por la Paz, a Judy Kelly, una activista maestra por la paz que ha estado en Chile, a Fede Madariaga, en fin, tantas compañeras y compañeros. Y bueno, les quiero pedir un minuto a Olga, a Kristine y a Anthony para que se despidan y tenemos que ir terminando porque el sindicato también nos pone sus reglas. Olga.
Bueno, entonces en este un minuto hay que hacer una proposición, al menos, ¿no? Porque en medio a todas estas colaboraciones muy importantes, me parece que sería interesante como fruto de esta actividad lanzarmos una carta por la paz direccionada a los organismos internacionales o algo así, reforzando nuestras preocupaciones, registrando nuestras preocupaciones como una forma también de dar a conocer más ampliamente también todo eso que hemos discutido acá, que son preocupaciones globales, ¿no? No es nada localizado. Entonces, recuerdo a Víctor Jara, que también, como Pablo ya había dicho, tiene su canción en el título de la revista, y que también tiene una de sus canciones que dice, hoy es el tiempo que puede ser mañana, ¿cierto? Entonces, lo que estamos haciendo aquí hoy día con esas preocupaciones, esta inquietación y todo, vamos a volver en alguna propuesta práctica. Esa carta puede ser, bueno, aunque parezca poca cosa, un granito, es un tanto simbólica para presionar y dar a conocer estos temas que estamos compartiendo acá, pero que puede ser uno de los encaminamientos que podemos sacar de esta nuestra actividad, ¿no? Entonces, esto vamos a hacer hoy el tiempo que puede ser mañana, hoy con algunas proposiciones a partir de estas preocupaciones y volver esto también una acción concreta. Muchas gracias, estoy realmente muy contenta de compartir con todos ustedes acá. Todos y todas.
Kristine, tu palabra final.
Last words, yes. I think it's very important to come out and to share this, also the recording of this meeting and distribute it and to promote solidarity. And for me, one real crucial point, if I'm looking to the Americas now, is the question of Cuba and Venezuela. And I think it's most important to support Cuba and to support also fights for close Guantanamo, because I think this is really very important, because Cuba shows that there are other possibilities and other ways of life to live in peace, and they working to overcome militarization. And this we have to support and have to help them, because I know they did a lot of support and solidarity to all the other countries, and even to European countries in the COVID pandemic. There we have also in Italy, and I think in some other countries, Cuban doctors, and therefore this should be also in focus, besides to get rid of NATO, because with NATO peace is impossible. And hopefully we see us again with the next international webinar, wherever whoever will organize the next one.
I guess I'll go. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening, and thank you so much, Pedro and Adrian. Beautiful. Thank you so much for getting our communication to a wider audience. And yes, Kristine, once again, Close Guantanamo. Witness Against Torture is a great organization that for 15 years has been trying to keep our mind on the atrocity of our prisons where we torture. And this is it's horrible. So thank you for mentioning that. And Olga, thank you also for just reminding us about how precious our environment is. I think of Pope Francis. When he first came on, he wrote his first encyclical, was all about caring for the earth. And here, and also nuclear weapons. You know, Pope Francis was the first one to introduce the treaty that I talked about, that we talked about. And he was the first, they were the first, the Vatican was the first to sign that treaty. And we're working on our bishops here in the United States, because we have conservative Catholic bishops. We have a few stars that are reiterating. So I just support everyone for speaking to your clergy, to your bishops, and getting out the word to support people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Pope Francis, who've been speaking for peace for a long time. You know, New York City, Kristine, is also a nuclear-free zone. I don't know, the New York City, yes, we passed the council resolution in the 1980s saying we're a nuclear-free zone. So
huge amount of cities, also in Germany, we had a lot of nuclear-free cities.
I hope, you know, China and Russia know that, and so we can, anyway, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about ourselves and our own nuclear weapons. So we also passed the rule that no ships can come into our port, this beautiful port here in our harbor with nuclear weapons, but we have a don't ask, don't tell policy. So we don't know, and we won't board the ships. So anyway, I want to thank everybody very much for listening and being part of this. Please, if there's one ask I have, please work on your countries to ratify. If you want to take down the US, I would just please work on your countries to ratify this treaty. You know, that would be the most important way to affect our military industry, for our allies, these to stand up and say, we're ratifying this treaty and we don't believe in your security and safety. It would be so important. So I'll support you, and I think we'll all support each one of you, but anything I can do to help your country, help my country, help your country, it's all together. We know that oneness. Good luck with translating all this, Adrian. Just God bless, and please take care of oneself. Love, stay close to nature, stay close to, keep faith, keep hope, and love one another. And keep fighting. You are courageous, you are brave, and you are wise. You're not naive. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a Kristine y a la Red Internacional contra la OTAN y contra la guerra. Muchas gracias, Anthony. Muchas gracias a SOAWatch, que ha apoyado este foro, a todas las organizaciones hermanas. Hemos organizado con Olga este espacio para hablar de estos problemas generales. Un abrazo de paz para todas y para todos, y seguimos en lucha.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Muchas gracias,
Sí,
muchas gracias. Un
muchas
gusto muy
gracias.
grande, muy grande.
Okay.